Doom: The Dark Ages, the newest entry in the Doom series, recently launched for the whole world to play on May 15th. But if you were one of the few to buy the $130 premium edition, you actually got a chance to play it 2 days earlier. I was one of those people. I'm recording this video now roughly a week after finishing the game with the goal of sharing my full thoughts, both positive and negative, without spoiling too much for those of you who haven't played it yet. I'll preface this video by saying I will be talking about the weapons, I just won't be talking about the story spoilers, so if you're looking for a totally blind playthrough, I recommend you go and play it for yourself and then come back to this video if you're still interested. But with all that out of the way, let's talk about Doom: The Dark Ages. One of the biggest surprises for me after finishing this game was seeing how story focused this game was compared to the rest of the games in the series. Games like Eternal in 2016 definitely had a focused story, same even goes for Doom 3, even though that game sucks, but I've still always felt that the story was second to gameplay in the series, at least up until this point. After Doomguy made his decision to stay and fight off the demons in Hell at the end of Doom 64, he at some point joined forces with the Night Sentinels of Argent Noor in their battle against Hell. If I'm saying that name wrong, I am so sorry. This game picks up during this time period where he is now held under control by the Makers, another alien race that are allies with the people of Argent Noor. He is currently being used as a weapon on the battlefield to help fight off the enemies in Hell, but is effectively on a leash since the Makers believe he is too powerful and dangerous to be on his own. He is in fact so powerful that the demons of Hell themselves fear him, which leads to the main antagonist of the story, the Hell Prince Azrak, or Ozrak, whatever, wanting the Slayer dead because he is holding back his Hell army. This game focuses on the battle between the Sentinels Makers, the Doomslayer, and the forces of Hell led by the Prince. I won't go any further into the story because I did want this review to be relatively spoiler free, but I will say that this game hands down has the best story that I think the series has ever seen. The characters are much more fleshed out this time around, and the story remains much more focused all throughout. On top of this, the quality of the cinematics have also seen a massive upgrade in this installment, which was really nice to see. I'm super glad that the developers decided to focus more on the story of this game and that they gave us more context on the Doomslayer's history, especially since we know so little about him in the greater scheme of things. With all that being said, from a story aspect, this game gets a round of applause from me. Now, this section will probably end up being a whole lot bigger than the rest of the sections in this video, and that's because I genuinely do believe gameplay is the make or break for games in this series. Sure, the story does matter, but overall I believe that what most people are looking for in these games is clean movement, cool kill animations, and fun weapons that make the player feel powerful. It's for this reason that I want to discuss each and every weapon along with all the movement and mechanics this game has to offer, so that you guys can hear my opinions on what I believe matters the most. This game's movement, although taking some getting used to, ended up being my favorite in the entire series, and it's really not even close. The Doomslayer in this title genuinely feels like a tank. Every moment of impact, whether it's hitting the ground, hitting the enemy, or even just walking around, makes you feel unstoppable, and that's the exact feeling I seek while trying to play a Doom game. To be honest, before playing I was a little worried that this would mean you would feel way too slow and that it would hold back the game, especially after playing through Eternal and getting used to its hyper fast movement, but after finishing this title now, I can proudly say that I was wrong. I really think now that this is the best approach they could have went for. This game serves as the perfect middle ground between 2016 and Eternal, and it's probably the closest we've had to classic Doom movement since the originals were first released. It's much faster paced than 2016's slower approach, but it's also not going overboard like Eternal when it comes to that game's crazy vertical movement and dashing mechanics. You don't feel too slow and you don't feel too fast. It's the perfect middle ground. But I can't explain movement any further without talking about a certain piece of equipment that plays a big role in this entry. Before talking about guns, I want to talk about the essential equipment that you're most definitely going to be using the most throughout your playthrough. And without sugarcoating it, the shield is definitely the most important piece of equipment you're going to unlock in this game. It is essential to combat, and it introduces potentially the biggest new mechanic that this game has to offer, and that is parrying. By right-clicking, the Slayer goes into a defense state where he can block and reduce incoming damage by raising his shield. If an enemy uses a green attack, the player can execute well-timed right-clicks to parry the attack, stunning the attacker and giving the player a chance to get a few free shots in on their opponent. Parrying is something you're going to be seeing a lot of throughout your playthrough, and it remains very important up until the very end. I personally love the addition of a parry system because even if it's nothing too complex, it still allows for a completely new and fresh feel to the game compared to the rest of the games in the series, and I think it fits this entry perfectly. Now remember how I said that I couldn't speak any more about movement without mentioning the shield? Well, that's because the shield also provides the Slayer with a dash ability called Shield Charge that makes up for a lot of this game's slower movement. This ability allows the player to charge directly at enemies from very long ranges, doing big damage and allowing the player to easily get in and out of combat at their own discretion. It's an awesome move and I'm super glad it's included since it allows for some pretty crazy combos with the rest of the Doomslayer's arsenal. You can also throw your shield like it's a boomerang, wiping out huge crowds of small enemies before having it return to you. You can even throw it at big enemies, stunning them and allowing you to deal massive damage without risking getting hit. There's even a grappling mechanic with the shield, which is used during certain levels to make otherwise impossible leaps and solve some pretty cool puzzles. But on top of all of these mechanics that I've already talked about, there's also one more big thing to talk about when it comes to the shield, and that is the runes. Throughout the course of the game, the Slayer receives shield upgrades called runes that improve the effectiveness of the shield whilst parrying Hell Surge blasts. These runes are the Ground Fissure rune, an ability that sends high damaging fissures through the ground, damaging every enemy in its route. The Holy Swarm rune, which shoots groups of daggers out of your shield to lock on and do big damage to enemies. The Auto Turret rune, which activates a high damaging mini turret to spray down a single target on your screen. And my personal favorite, the Heaven Splitter rune, which shoots a lightning bolt down from the sky, damaging and stunning any enemy in its range for a short period of time. These runes all have their own unique upgrades that increase their effectiveness and all encourage the player to learn and master the parry system. Overall though, in my opinion, I do believe that the shield is an amazing addition to the game and it's probably my favorite thing added in this entry. Something about the Slayer having a chainsaw shield as a secondary just feels right to me, and I pray that this is not a one-time item and it returns in the future. The Doomslayer is given 3 melee weapons throughout this game: the Power Gauntlet, the Flail, and the Dread Mace. The Power Gauntlet allows for the player to punch enemies and perform multiple hit combos that increase in damage after each punch. It requires the gauntlet to recharge, which happens naturally over time or can be recharged much faster with gauntlet charges that are found on the ground quite frequently. If you're using this melee weapon correctly, you'll essentially be using it non-stop in combat. The Flail, I'm just gonna go out and say it, is definitely the best choice, at least in my opinion. It's a massive spiky metal flail that you can use to absolutely annihilate enemies. It does significantly more damage than the Power Gauntlet, and it can hurt multiple enemies at once with a blast impact attack. Its drawback comes from the fact that it takes longer to recharge and requires you to parry enemies to recharge it, but in my opinion, the pros definitely outweigh the cons. The final melee weapon, the Dread Mace, only has one charge but allows for one devastating hit on an enemy or crowd of enemies that will completely refill all your ammo for all of your guns. Its drawback is most definitely the recharge time and the fact that, yeah, it can only be used once. Overall, I think that all the melee weapons in this game are great, since they all allow for different and unique playstyles. But as you could probably guess, my favorite was most definitely the mace. He meant to say flail. He's just stupid. This one just felt extra fun to use, and it was the perfect middle ground between the two others, which fit my playstyle the most. The Power Gauntlet just didn't feel as fun to me, and the Dread Mace just... I couldn't deal with that long charge time. Overall though, the melee weapons definitely get a W from me. Now, for the part that probably matters the most, let's talk about the guns. Shotguns, man, they're just classic. The combat shotgun is simply your standard shotgun. Decent reload time, and decent ammo capacity. It can be upgraded to apply burn damage to enemies, drop more ammo on kills, or increase its rate of fire. Overall, it's solid. It definitely works just fine for players who prefer a faster paced auto shotgun that's sure to do at least some decent damage. But when it comes to Doom games, my preference will always be the much more iconic Super Shotgun. This absolute beast of a double barrel shotgun does ridiculous damage with the drawback of having a slower reload time and smaller ammo capacity. This is definitely made up for though through just the sheer possible damage that this thing is capable of outputting, being able to take out massive enemies in just as little as 2 shots. And when you then account for the upgrades of faster shooting speed, increased armor damage, and an increase of shooting projectiles, I don't think there's any denying the power of this weapon. It was definitely my most used weapon in Eternal, and it remains my most used weapon in this title. It was a shame not to see the meat hook upgrade return in this game, but it does make a lot of sense when you look at the shield bash ability, which in principle pretty much does the same thing. Overall though, I think the shotguns are great in this game, and I was definitely pleased by both variants. Super on top though. The Shredder is essentially a full auto nail gun. It sends a constant stream of what I assume is iron nails at the enemy in a short, precise range. Accuracy definitely matters a lot if you are to use this weapon correctly. It can be upgraded to increase fire rate and hit more than one enemy at once if an enemy is being targeted by the shield saw. But most importantly of all, it can also be given the ability to apply pincushion so that after hitting an enemy enough, you can throw your shield at the enemy or charge at them to create a crowd damaging explosive attack. It's overall a very solid weapon. Now the Impaler on the other hand is essentially the closest you're going to get to a sniper in this game. It doesn't have a scope, but it shoots one precise high damaging projectile at an enemy. It can be upgraded to slow time while charging up a shot and increase ammo drops by various means such as throwing your shield or hitting successful headshots. These weapons are both very solid, but I gotta say I did prefer using the Shredder over the Impaler. On a second playthrough, I may be more inclined to use the Impaler, but I found the weapon to be much more situational, whilst the Shredder felt like a strong pick for most combat situations. Overall though, I'm not complaining about either weapon, they're both great additions. The Plasma Accelerator is a full auto gun that shoots plasma as its ammo type. It can do some pretty crazy damage, but when it's upgraded is when it really shines. The upgrades of this weapon allow for it to increase in charge. Once it reaches maximum charge, depending on what upgrades you have, it can increase in damage, increase in accuracy, become supercharged, and when released can send a high damaging crowd control blast that can take down full groups of enemies in an instant. It's overall a very solid weapon and definitely a solid pick. Now the Plasma Cycler on the other hand is essentially a direct upgrade of the Accelerator that shoots two separate streams of plasma instead of just one. Where they differ is in their upgrades. The Cycler can be upgraded to give enemies a debuff called Shock. When applied, this allows for you to do increased damage to the enemy and can be upgraded so that once you kill a shocked enemy, the enemies around them can also gain shock. When it's fully upgraded, you can then also obtain the charge feature from the Accelerator, making this weapon an absolute demon. Even though the Cycler in many ways just sounds like a replacement for the Accelerator, I still found myself using both throughout my playthrough, but it still really does depend on the situation. Cycler was definitely the better pick when it came to fighting crowds, but for single target use, I still found the Accelerator to reign supreme. Both these weapons overall though are absolutely fantastic additions. The Pulverizer has to be one of my favorite weapons in this whole game. It's another full auto weapon, but instead of using plasma or bullets as ammo, it uses crushed skulls. In fact, you literally watch the process of how ammo is made in real time as it's happening, and it looks absolutely insane. This weapon is effectively a massive minigun with a huge projectile spread, allowing it to be one of the best crowd control weapons in the century. It can be upgraded to increase projectile spread further, increase the number of projectiles it shoots, and to gain the ability to build charge over time, much like the plasma weapons. When fully charged, the weapon is most definitely at its strongest, with an increased rate of fire and a faster movement speed for the player. The Ravager, on the other hand, is effectively a pulverizer built for more single target use. Its spread is reduced a good bit, allowing it to do massive damage in only a small area. Its upgrades allow for you to increase ammo and health drops, as well as increase charge rate or rate of fire. I personally prefer using the Pulverizer since I do believe it works better in more situations, but the Ravager still is an equally as powerful and awesome weapon overall. I absolutely adore the concept of these items, and I'm super glad that they made it into the Century. They were probably my favorite guns to use outside of the Super Shotgun, but to be honest, I don't think it was really a fair competition. The Chain Shot is a very interesting weapon. Up until the point that you get this gun, most weapons had a counterpart, but this one is instead entirely standalone. It functions like a massive harpoon that shoots a massive metal ball at the enemy, doing massive damage before returning to you. You can charge up the ball to have increased range, damage, and speed, making the weapon a whole lot more effective. It can also be upgraded to then do increased armor damage, allow parrying to fully charge the ball, and another upgrade allows for the weapon to create a powerful explosion upon impact, allowing for great crowd control. This weapon is an interesting one. It's really fun to use, and it feels a lot different than the rest of the weapons found in the game. I'm definitely interested in trying this one out more in future playthroughs because it's one that I just never ended up using all that much, but from the time I did, I can really see the potential it has. I think in future playthroughs, this one might have a chance to creep up in my favorites. Grenade Launcher and Rocket Launcher. These are your classic crowd control weapons. The Grenade Launcher functions just like your standard grenade launcher would. It definitely requires a bit more learning though, since you have to account for the trajectory of the grenades when you're shooting them. But if you do land direct hits, you're doing massive damage to an enemy and you're really hurting any enemy that's around them. It can be upgraded so that after certain conditions are met, like every second or third direct hit, or every time you hit an enemy being stunned by a shield, Cluster grenades will separate at impact, doing even more damage to the enemy and any enemy that is surrounding them. It's overall an awesome weapon. Much like the grenade launcher, your rocket launcher is just your standard rocket launcher. Direct hits will definitely do more damage if landed, but either way you're going to be doing crazy damage with this weapon. It can be upgraded so that parries activate a player state called cannibalism, where hurting yourself with a rocket splash damage heals you for a short period of time. You can then upgrade the length of this state, as well as upgrading splash damage or receiving a more powerful charged rocket shot after successful Hell Surge parries. I don't have much to say about these weapons, honestly. They are an absolute blast to use, and they feel just as overpowered as they always have. I will say though, weirdly enough, that I ended up using the grenade launcher a hell of a lot more than the rocket launcher. There was just something so satisfying to me about the cluster grenade upgrade, but I know that's probably going to be different for many other players. Overall, both great weapons, and I'm glad they both made it. You knew I had to keep the best for last, and you must have known that the BFG has to make it into this title somehow. This time, they kinda changed up the formula though. Instead of a gun this time, since everything's medieval, they gave us the big f***ing crossbow. But don't worry, it's just as broken as it's always been. The BFC shoots one massive projectile that takes out pretty much anything that is seen on screen. I mean, just look at this. Oh my. Okay, yeah, it decimates. It's by far the most overpowered weapon you get in the game, much like it was in all the other entries, which is why you're always limited to only 3 shots, which are only found on rare occasion across each map. There's no upgrades for this weapon because, I mean, how are they going to upgrade it? It's just too busted. Not much else to say about it though, it's just another awesome weapon that needed to make it somehow. Overall though, if you couldn't already tell, I absolutely adore this game's gameplay. I think the movement is the perfect blend of everything I loved from the previous Doom games, and I think that the weapons this time around are some of the coolest conceptually and were some of the most fun to use in the entire series. Parrying is also something I always believed that this series needed, and now that I've had the chance to try it out, I'm super pleased with how it turned out. There's now just one more thing I wanted to touch on before I move on to the next section of the video, and that is the removal of glory kills. I understand this was something that was going to upset fans, and it kinda does suck to not see them return, at least in their former glory. Instead of glory kills, this game gives us finishing moves, where after only certain bigger enemies are weakened, they enter a purple state, and the player is prompted to use a finishing move on them. The finishing moves are still different depending on the enemy you're facing, and there are some really cool animations that you'll see throughout the game. I know a lot of fans are upset about this, but I still don't think it's an end-all be-all at all for this game. With the way that the shield and parry system works in the combat and how rampant enemy spawns are at all times, especially for smaller creatures like imps, I can kinda understand the reason for the removal, even if it does suck to see them go. I also just briefly want to talk about the game's performance issues at launch before moving on from gameplay. This game did have some pretty bad performance issues at launch, with a lot of people, including a good friend of mine, having their game freeze minutes after launching and it happening like consistently. I somehow managed to dodge all these crashes even though I don't have a crazy computer. I'm only using like a 3060. But I can still understand how, for someone experiencing these crashes, this could really hinder the gameplay and could definitely affect their perception on the game. Now, this was during early access, and I'm not sure if they've released performance patches. They probably have at this point. But the problem definitely still does stand that a lot of companies are releasing games, at least on computer. I'm not sure if this was even a problem on PS5 or Xbox Series X, but a lot of big companies are dropping games that just do not function properly on the computer at launch. And I do think it's something that needs to change. But moving on from that little rant, let's talk about the levels. This game plays in a pretty different format than the rest of the games in the series. Instead of being segmented into missions like previous titles, this game is instead segmented into chapters which keep it more story focused and fluent, which I found to be just a general upgrade. Most chapters follow the same mission formats as Eternal and previous games. Reach a certain area, kill a certain number of forts of enemies or something like that, then progress to the next area. I will say though, in some missions, you may even need to collect keys or skulls to progress, much like in the old classic Doom games, which was a really cool callback. But on top of your typical missions, this game also does introduce 2 new kinds of missions where you either fly a dragon or ride a mech. And let me just tell you, these missions are awesome. In missions where you are flying the dragon, you will typically fly through an area, destroying massive enemies or enemy ships before visiting different landing sites where you will complete common mission objectives. This type of mission is unlike anything I've ever seen in Doom before, but I was totally up for it considering the dragon controls well, and it's just generally fun to use. I also just feel with the vibe that the Dark Ages is going for, the dragon missions just kind of fit in well, and I don't think that they ever really overstay their welcome, or are really unenjoyable at all. But moving into the other mission type, in the mech missions you get to complete a common mission objective, whilst also controlling a tyrant-sized Doomslayer mech and fighting actual tyrants, which at first I really just couldn't believe at all. Being at the same scale as the final boss from Doom Eternal and taking down actual tyrants felt like any Doom player's dream, at least for me. The controls in the mech feel simple yet intuitive, which I'm not complaining about. It just requires you to parry and punch, but they still allow for some really fun battles, so I ain't gonna complain. These new mission types really just made the game stand out from the others, and gave the game its own identity, which is something I'm never gonna complain about. This game has its classic missions that any old-fashioned Doom player will enjoy, but it also goes for something bigger, and in my opinion does a good job at it, never pushing things way too far. Now the last thing I want to discuss real quick is the game's secrets. Secrets have always been a staple to the series, and I feel like it's definitely important to mention since they've been there since the start. I mean, in some of those old games, man, those secrets were absolute nightmares to find. This game definitely also has them, but I will say they are a ton easier to find. There definitely does exist some that are pretty tricky to discover. In fact, I do remember a secret landing spot in a later level that gave me a lot of trouble, but most of the rest of the secrets and collectibles are no trouble at all to find, especially if you're using the map. The map in this game is something I didn't really mention at first, but it works very well. In fact, probably too well. If you go even somewhat near a secret or resource, it displays it on the map immediately. This is overall a good thing, I suppose, but I do think it babies you a little too much, at least for secrets. I mean, some of these secrets are already obvious as shit, and I don't think it's really necessary to display them on the map. I mean, if you can't see some of these, you're probably going blind. The secret rewards in this game consist of a few things, such as extra lives, which are exactly what you think, a free revive after dying, gold and rubies, which are used to upgrade weapons, wraith stones, which are used to obtain the final upgrade for weapons as well as their mastery quest, and then there's also weapon skins for all your guns, collectible toys that you can inspect on the menu, and codex entries for those of you who really care about that little bit of extra lore. What I just listed isn't only secrets, that is all of the resources you can get on the map. As you can tell, there is a lot less than in Eternal. I get that this game has no hub world like the ship in Eternal, so a lot of Eternal's collectibles really just don't make sense. But I do think it would have been cool to at least keep some of the other secrets, like the cheat codes for example, or even the vinyls. I thought they were cool additions, and I don't know why they couldn't have made it into this game. It's not a big thing, it might be a little nitpicky of me, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Overall, when it comes to this game's chapters, level design, and all of its collectibles, aside from what I've already mentioned, I really don't have complaints. Aside from harder secrets and more collectibles, I literally got everything that I wanted and more. I mean, this game just came out and it already has some of my favorite missions from this entire series. My favorite levels right now are the Spire of Narathal, Harbor of Souls, and Resurrection. Now, I won't go into detail because I would have to spoil a lot of the story, but some of these levels, man, they have a lot of classic callbacks and attributes that give that classic Doom feel I love so much. And one of them even introduces a new villain to the series that is, it's from one of my favorite mythos of all time. It's Cthulhu. I mean, he's in the trailer, don't get mad. But to conclude this review, I absolutely adored this game. It really is everything I wanted and more. I truly believe that this is the most polished and complete feeling Doom game that has pretty much ever released. I mean, it has the best story of any Doom game, with most definitely the best cinematics that I've ever seen in the series. I'd say it debatably has the best gameplay the series has ever seen. I mean, it's not often that I have plans to replay a game directly after playing it, but I kinda am feeling that urge with this one. You can just kind of tell that the developers wanted this game to stand out from the rest, and that they reached for new heights that I literally never thought were possible for the series. But it does reach these new heights, and I do think that it outdoes itself doing so. All I can say is I need that release date for the DLC, and I need it now. But with all that being said, guys, thank you for watching. Do you agree with my opinions? Did you enjoy the game? This was all just my opinion on everything, but I really am eager to see what other people thought of the game, and if you guys can let me know in the comments below, I'd appreciate it. And to my loyal 200 or so subscribers, I'm sorry for the inactivity. I've just kind of been locked out, and for that I'm sorry. But with Mario Kart World now on the way, maybe you'll see a video from me sooner than you thought. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Please like and subscribe.